Welcome to the deep dive. So glad you could join us today. Quick question for you. When was the last time you really stopped to think about plant roots? You know, that hidden world down there under the soil. Probably not very often, right? But what if I told you that beneath our feet, there's this incredibly complex, vital, and, well, surprisingly dynamic universe? It's not just holding plants up. It's like actively shaping our whole planet. This deep dive, I think it's going to completely change how you see the ground beneath you.
It's absolutely true. You know, the flowers and leaves get all the attention, right?
Yeah.
Up there in the sun. But understanding roots is just, well, it's fundamental, whether you're just, tending a houseplant or you're a farmer managing huge fields, or even if you're just curious about how ecosystems work or climate change. The story of roots, it really underpins everything.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our mission for you today is to sort of pull back the soil curtain, if you will, explore this hidden world beneath our feet and discover just how vital and honestly how fascinating roots truly are. So let's start with the basics, the stuff most of us know. Roots anchor plants, absorb water, minerals. That's job one, right? But can you break down why these basic functions are actually so critical right from the get-go when a seed sprouts?
Yeah, it's because that early supply of water and minerals, it's just non-negotiable for a young plant. The very first thing that emerges from a germinating seed is the embryonic root, the radical. And this happens fast, it has to. It ensures the plant can immediately start getting water, expanding cells for the shoot to grow, and kicking off photosynthesis. Without that immediate foundation underground, the plant just can't make it above ground. Simple as that.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. While roots are essential for most plants, some don't have them at all. Like, think about mosses and liverworts, those sort of ancient, simpler plants. Bryophytes, or Spanish moss that stuff just hangs from trees, or even water ferns like salvinia. How do they manage?
Well, those plants have adapted to environments where it's pretty much always wet, so they just absorb nutrients directly through their leaves or other surfaces. They basically bypass the need for roots. It's a pretty fascinating alternative strategy, evolutionarily speaking. But yeah, for the vast majority of plants, roots are absolutely indispensable, and they can produce just an astounding amount of stuff.
And when you say astounding, you really mean it. Forget what you think you know about roots. Imagine a single rye plant, maybe the size of a kitchen broom. Its underground network, its roots, could stretch 500 kilometers. That's over 300 miles if you laid them end to end, and the surface area. A staggering 640 square meters. That's like covering 2 tennis courts. You've probably seen this if you've ever tried pulling up crabgrass.
Yeah.
It just binds that soil like crazy. I know I've had that frustrating tug.
Oh, yeah. A true testament to its root system's power, even if it drives gardeners mad. And that extensive soil binding ability, that's precisely why plants, especially grasses, are so crucial in preventing erosion from wind and water. Their roots form this incredible natural net underground. Really effective.
So, okay, beyond just holding things down and drinking water, what else are these underground superstars up to? We know some roots are food for us, biennials, right? They store carbs in their roots the first year. Carrots, sugar beets, parsnips, rutabagas. But what about some maybe more surprising uses? Or historical roles for these food roots?
Oh, there's so many others. Yams, turnips, horseradish, cassava too, which is interesting because it actually has this poisonous latex you have to get out first. Yeah. And sugar beets? About 35% of the world's sugar comes from them. But what's really fascinating, I think, is how plants make these complex secondary compounds, often for their own defense. Take mandrake. Historically used for pain relief, right? But in large doses, highly toxic.
Right.
Or rotenone from tropical plant roots. It was used as a natural insecticide. But now there's research linking it potentially to Parkinson's disease in humans. It just highlights this dual nature, doesn't it? How a plant's own defense chemistry can be incredibly useful, but also potentially dangerous for us.
That's a really critical point. How something helpful can also be harmful. So, beyond storing energy or making these defensive chemicals, are roots also like actively creating other vital stuff for the plant itself?
Oh, absolutely. There are like little chemical factories down there. Roots produce essential plant hormones, cytokinins, gibberellins. These get sent up to the shoot and influence how the plant grows and develops. And speaking of secondary compounds, nicotine, the poison in tobacco that deters herbivores, it's actually made in the tobacco roots first, then sent up to the leaves.
No way. I always assumed it was made in the leaves.
Nope. roots first. And on a more positive note, there's this African tree, Babgunia madagascariensis. Its roots produce a yellow terpene that traditional healers have used for ages against bacterial and fungal infections. So, potential future medical uses there too.
So roots aren't just chemical wizards, they're incredible engineers too.
Yeah.
Providing physical support. We've all seen corn plants, right? With those prop roots coming out of the stem into the soil.
Exactly. Keeps them upright.
But what about some really dramatic examples?
Oh, for sheer scale, you have to look at tropical trees. They often develop these massive buttress roots. They can be huge, like as tall as a person.
Yeah.
And they're crucial in those often thin tropical soils to stop the trees from falling over in strong winds. And then there's the banyan tree, legendary. It sends down these huge rope-like aerial roots from its branches. They grow down, anchor in the soil, and eventually become thick like extra trunks. A single banyan tree can actually spread to cover several acres, supported by hundreds of these root columns.
It's incredible. One tree covering acres. Just held up by its own root network. And the specialization doesn't stop there, does it? Are there other kinds of really specialized roots?
Oh, many more. Some plants, like dandelions or hyacinth, have contractile roots. They literally shorten themselves by collapsing cells, pulling the shoot deeper into the ground. Helps with warmth, protection, especially in unpredictable spring weather.
That's clever.
Isn't it? Then you've got parasitic roots. Dodder, mistletoe, they actually penetrate the host plant stem and tack right into its vascular system, stealing water, minerals, food.
Little vampires?
Pretty much. And then epiphytes, plants that grow in other plants, but not parasitically. They have amazing aerial roots. Orchids, for example. Some have aerial roots that can photosynthesize.
Photosynthesis in the roots.
Yeah, and there's this plant called the flower pot plant, Dischidia rafflesiana. Its aerial roots grow into these special hollow leaves it makes. The leaves collect water, debris. Sometimes ants even move in.
Ants.
Yeah, and the ants' waste products conveniently provide nutrients for the plant. It's this amazing little partnership.
So, okay, the big takeaway for us, the curious learner, seems to be roots are anything but passive anchors. They're dynamic, multi-talented organs, constantly adapting, innovating.
Exactly. Far more complex than they look.
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
Now, let's dig a bit deeper, maybe into the practical side. When you encounter plant roots, say in the garden, what are the main types of root systems you'll find? How do they differ?
Generally, you'll see two main setups. First, there's the taproot system. Think dandelions, carrots, many trees. You have one main strong root going deep with smaller branches coming off it. Then, in contrast, you have plants like grasses, monocots. They typically have a fibrous root system. The first root, the primary one, doesn't live long. It gets replaced by lots of what we call adventitious roots growing from the stem base. These form a dense, usually shallower network.
And adventitious roots, just to clarify for everyone listening, those are roots that grow from somewhere other than another root, right? Like from a stem or maybe even a leaf.
That's exactly right.
It's a neat trick. Gardeners use it, actually, like with tomato plants. They often strip off the bottom leaves and bury part of the stem sideways. And they do that specifically to encourage more of those adventitious roots to form along the buried stem. Gives the plant a stronger start.
A very common technique, yes. And regardless of the system, taproot or fibrous both produce what we call feeder roots. These are the really fine, usually shallow peripheral roots, often less than 2 millimeters thick. Very tiny. And these are the ones doing most of the active absorption of water and minerals. They can spread out surprisingly far. A corn plant might have feeder roots reaching about a meter, 3 feet or so in all directions.
Wow.
But these delicate roots, they don't live very long. They need to be constantly replaced, which is why for gardeners, when you're transplanting something, it's really crucial to dig up a big enough root ball to include as many of these fragile feeder roots as possible. If you damage too many, the plant's growth can really slow down while it has to regrow them. It's like trying to run a marathon right after getting new legs.
That's a great image. Okay, so we've got the big picture, different systems, these vital feeder roots. But let's zoom in even closer now, microscopically close. How do roots actually do all this amazing work? What's the architecture like right at the tip? Protecting itself, absorbing.
Right.
How does that work?
Well, it's a multi-layered marvel down there. Externally, you've got the branch roots coming off, then that fuzzy zone of root hairs we talked about.
Right, the main absorption area.
Exactly. And then, right at the very end, the delicate root tip. And that tip has amazing protection. This little thimble-shaped structure called the root cap
A cat.
Yeah, like a little hard hat. Its cells are constantly being made by the root's growth engine, the apical meristem right behind it. And as the root pushes through the soil, these cap cells get sloughed off, worn away. What's really intriguing is the idea that inside these root cap cells, there are these starch-rich plastids called amyloplasts. And they might actually act as gravity sensors. They settle downwards, telling the root which way is down.
Like little internal compasses?
Sort of, yeah, guiding its growth. There's still a lot of research going on about this, gravitropism it's called, even experiments up in space to try and understand it better without gravity messing things up.
So cool. Okay, so what happens to those root cap cells that get sloughed off? Do they just, like, decompose?
No. This is another fascinating bit. Those sloughed off cells become what are called root border cells. And they don't just die immediately. They stay metabolically active for a while, and they act like, well, like biological goalies.
At least.
Yeah, they actually change the environment right around the root tip in ways that help prevent attacks from harmful microbes and tiny soil worms, nematodes. It's like an active defense shield right at the front line.
That's brilliant. And I've heard roots secrete some kind of gooey stuff, too. What's that about?
You're thinking of mucilage. It's this sticky substance, mostly polysaccharides, secreted by the outer epidermal cells at the root tip. The amount can be staggering. Like, for corn plants in just 1 hectare, it's estimated they secrete about 1,000 cubic meters of mucilage.
Whoa, that's a lot of goo.
It really is. Enough to fill a pretty big house. And it does several important jobs. It lubricates the root, helping it slide through the soil. It aids water and mineral absorption. It prevents the root tip from drying out. And it even helps create a good environment for beneficial microbes. It's like the root's personal, multi-purpose lubricant and welcome mat.
Okay, so we have this protective cap, these goalie cells, lubricating goo, all on the outside. But if we could peek inside the root tip, what's the internal structure? How is it organized?
If you look at a root lengthwise, you see this really organized structure with different zones doing different things. Right at the tip, you've got the root cap. Just behind that is the zone of cell division. That's the apical meristem, making new cells.
Right.
Above that, you have the zone of elongation. This is where those newly made cells stretch out dramatically, mostly by taking up water. That's what actually pushes the root tip forward through the soil.
So they inflate like little balloons.
Kind of, yeah. And then further up, you get the zone of maturation. This is where the cells finish developing and specialize into different tissues to do their jobs, like forming root hairs for absorption. These specialized tissues include the epidermis on the outside, the cortex inside that for storage and air spaces, and right at the core, the vascular tissues, the plant's plumbing.
Right, the plumbing, xylem and phloem. But how does the root make sure only the good stuff gets into that plumbing? Is there like a filter?
Absolutely, a critical one. It's a layer of cells called the endodermis. Think of it as the innermost layer of the cortex. It acts as a waterproof barrier, a security checkpoint, around the central vascular cylinder.
How does it do that?
It has this special strip embedded in its walls made of a waxy substance called suberin. It's called the Casparian strip. This strip blocks water and dissolved minerals from just seeping between the endodermal cells. It forces everything to pass through the living part of the endodermal cells through their cytoplasm.
So it has to go through the cell's security check, basically.
Exactly. It's the plant's ultimate selective filter. It ensures only the beneficial minerals it wants actually get into the xylem, the water-conducting pipe going up.
That selectivity must be incredibly important. Dead xylem cells can't choose what they carry, right?
Precisely. The living cells of the root hairs and the endodermis are the gatekeepers. They prevent toxic stuff from getting into the rest of the plant.
Okay, so once the good stuff passes the endodermis checkpoint, it goes into the xylem to go up, and sugars come down the phloem. And you mentioned root hairs again. How do they specifically play into this absorption process? They're tiny, you said.
Incredibly narrow, yeah. About 10 micrometers in diameter, which is crucial because it lets them squeeze into tiny soil pores that the main root can't reach. And they grow really fast, constantly exploring new soil patches. They dramatically increase the root's surface area for absorption.
So they're like these super efficient microprobes or microsnorkels reaching everywhere. How do they actually pull minerals out of the soil, especially if the concentration is really low? That sounds like it would take energy.
It absolutely does. Mineral absorption isn't passive. It's highly selective and requires a lot of energy in the form of ATP.
ATP, the cell's energy currency.
Right. There are special transporter proteins embedded in the membranes of the root hair cells and also the endodermal cells. These proteins act like tiny pumps or gates. They specifically recognize and bind to the beneficial mineral ions the plant needs. And then they actively ferry them across the membrane into the cell, even if the concentration outside in the soil is much lower than inside the cell.
So they're pumping uphill, concentration-wise.
Exactly. And that requires energy. They often use something called a proton gradient. The cell pumps protons, hydrogen ions out, creating an electrochemical gradient like charging a battery. Then, the energy released as protons flow back in is used to power the transport of the desired minerals into the cell. It's a really clever system fueled by ATP hydrolysis.
Much more controlled than just letting things diffuse in.
Oh, much more. It allows the plant to accumulate the nutrients it needs and exclude the ones it doesn't, or ones that are toxic. As you said, the xylem can't discriminate, so this selection has to happen in the living cells before the xylem.
Got it. So the roots act as this incredibly sophisticated active filtration system. And are there different routes these minerals take through the root tissues to get to that central vascular core?
Yes, fundamentally two pathways. There's the symplastic route, where minerals move from cell to cell through tiny connecting channels called plasmodesmata. Think of it like moving through interconnected rooms inside a building.
Okay.
Then there's the apoplastic route, which is movement along the cell walls in the spaces between cells, like moving through the hallways and corridors.
Oh, okay.
And this is key, that apoplastic route, the hallway route, gets blocked at the endodermis by that waterproof Casparian strip.
The security checkpoint again.
Exactly. So anything traveling via the apoplast is forced to enter an endodermal cell, cross its membrane, get screened, essentially, and then continue via the symplast into the vascular tissue. Everything has to pass through a living gatekeeper.
Okay, that makes sense. It's all about control. So these roots are incredibly complex, highly organized. Let's broaden out again. Why is mineral nutrition so critical, and what are some of the biggest challenges roots face getting what they need?
Well, plants need quite a range of minerals, some in large amounts macronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, others in tiny amounts micronutrients like iron, zinc, copper. But even tiny amounts are essential. Each one plays specific vital roles. Magnesium, for example, is right at the heart of the chlorophyll molecule for photosynthesis.
Right.
Iron is crucial for enzymes involved in respiration and chlorophyll synthesis. Without them, the plant just can't function properly.
And what are the big hurdles in the soil itself?
One huge, often unseen challenge is aluminum toxicity. Aluminum is super abundant in the Earth's crust, but it becomes soluble and toxic to plants in acid soils.
Acid soils. How common are they?
Pretty common. About 30% of the world's arable land, especially in the tropics, and also areas affected by acid rain. And aluminum is nasty stuff for roots. It can stop root elongation almost immediately, like within 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Wow. How?
It binds to important molecules in cell membranes and walls, disrupting their function, interfering with cell division. It's bad news.
So how do plants cope in those soils?
They've evolved some clever strategies. Some plants just don't produce the transporter proteins that would let aluminum into their cells in the first place. Avoidance.
Makes sense.
Others actively pump out organic acids, like citrate or malate, from their root tips. These acids bind strongly to the aluminum ions in the soil, basically locking them up so they can't harm the root.
Neutralizing the threat.
Exactly. Or some plants might let aluminum into the root, but then quickly sequester it, lock it away safely inside the cell walls or vacuoles where it can't interfere with metabolism.
Fascinating adaptations. What about other major challenges, like phosphorus?
Ah, yes. Phosphate availability. Phosphorus is absolutely vital. DNA, RNA, ATP, cell membranes, you name it.
Can't live without it.
Nope. But the problem is phosphate in the soil often binds really tightly to soil particles, especially iron, aluminum, or calcium compounds, depending on the soil pH. So even if there's technically a lot of phosphorus in the soil, it might not be in a form the plant can actually absorb. It's locked up.
So how do roots unlock it?
Again, they're resourceful. They can release those organic acids or even hydrogen ions to lower the pH right around the root, which can help dissolve some of the bound phosphate.
Okay.
They also respond by changing their architecture, increasing root branching, making more or longer root hairs, just maximizing the surface area to explore more soil volume.
Covering more ground.
Exactly. Some plants even exude enzymes called phosphatases that can break down organic forms of phosphorus in the soil, releasing usable phosphate. And their phosphate transporter proteins are incredibly efficient at scavenging even very low concentrations. They work hard for it.
Now, here's something that seems a bit counterintuitive. You mentioned roots need organic food sugars from the leaves, right?
Via the phloem. They're heterotrophic. They can't make their own food.
Right. And they also need oxygen. Which raises the question, why do roots need oxygen if they're underground and not doing photosynthesis?
That's a great question and a really important point. They need oxygen for the same reason we do. Aerobic respiration. Remember all that active transport of minerals we talked about? Pumping ions against concentration gradient?
Yeah, it needs ATP energy.
Exactly. And aerobic respiration, using oxygen to break down those sugars sent from the leaves, is by far the most efficient way to produce large amounts of ATP. Cell division, growth, nutrient uptake. All these root activities are energy intensive.
So they need oxygen to burn the fuel delivered from the leaves efficiently.
Precisely. Some plants in waterlogged, oxygen-poor soils, like mangroves, can survive short-term using anaerobic fermentation. But it produces much less ATP. It's really just a survival mechanism. For most roots, a steady supply of oxygen from air pockets in the soil is essential for healthy function and growth.
That makes perfect sense. And this respiration, releasing carbon dioxide, does that have wider impacts beyond just the plant?
It really does. That CO2 released by roots dissolves in the water present in the soil, forming weak carbonic acid. This carbonic acid is a key agent in the chemical weathering of rocks over long timescales.
Weathering rocks, how does that connect?
Well, the acid helps dissolve minerals in rocks, and in the process, it can convert atmospheric CO2 indirectly into bicarbonate ions dissolved in water. These bicarbonate ions eventually wash into rivers and oceans, where marine organisms use them to build shells and skeletons made of calcium carbonate.
So root activity helps lock up carbon in rocks.
Over geological time, yes, it's part of the slow carbon cycle. That, plus the fact that roots contribute a lot of organic matter to the soil, some of which, like compounds, lignin and suberin from root cell walls, is quite resistant to decay and forms stable soil humus, that also locks up carbon.
So roots are playing a role in regulating atmospheric CO2.
A significant role, especially when you consider the vastness of plant life on Earth. There's even evidence suggesting that the evolution and spread of deep-rooted plants, particularly during periods like the Devonian, dramatically increased weathering rates. And this might have led to a significant drop in atmospheric CO2 levels near the end of the Paleozoic era, the end of the Coal Age, around 286 million years ago, potentially contributing to global cooling and paving the way for the rise of seed plants.
Wow, that's a profound connection. Roots shaping global climate over millions of years. Okay, so roots are resilient, adaptable, powerful, but they don't always work alone, do they? Especially in tough, low-nutrient soils. They get help.
That's absolutely right. They form crucial symbiotic relationships with beneficial soil microbes. It's like having a hidden support network.
And one of the most famous examples is mycorrhizal fungi, right?
Yes, mycorrhiza. These fungi form partnerships with the roots of almost all vascular plants, maybe 80–90%. They are incredibly important, especially for providing phosphate, which we know can be hard to get, but also other minerals and even water.
And what does the fungus get in return?
It gets sugars, carbohydrates from the plant energy it can't produce itself. It's a classic trait. And this isn't some newfangled thing. This partnership is ancient. Fossil evidence shows it goes back over 400 million years.
400 million years. That's almost unbelievable. So this collaboration is almost as old as land plants themselves.
Pretty much. It was likely essential for plants to even colonize land successfully in the first place.
Incredible. And then there are the nitrogen-fixing bacteria. They have a different but equally vital, unique skill.
Yes, another crucial partnership. Atmospheric nitrogen gas, N2, makes up almost 80% of our air, but plants can't use it in that form.
It's unusable for them.
Right. But certain bacteria possess the unique enzyme, nitrogenase, that can break the strong triple bond in N2 gas and convert it, or fix it, into ammonia, NH3, which plants can then use to build proteins, amino acids, DNA, all sorts of vital molecules.
Life-changing, literally. So how do these bacteria team up with plants? Is it just random luck if they find a root?
Oh no, it's far more sophisticated than that. Especially the well-studied relationship between rhizobia, bacteria, and legumes, peas, beans, clover, alfalfa, that family. They form specialized structures on the roots called nodules, and getting there involves this intricate chemical conversation.
A conversation, like back and forth signals.
Exactly. First, the legume root releases specific chemical signals, compounds called flavonoids, into the soil.
Okay, like sending out a call.
Precisely. If the right kind of rhizobia bacteria are nearby, they recognize these specific flavonoids. In response, the bacteria produce their own signals called nod factors, short for nodulation factors.
Nod factors, okay.
These nod factors are detected by the root hairs of the legume, and the signal causes the root hair to curl around the bacteria, trapping them. It also triggers cell division in the root cortex underneath, starting the formation of the nodule. The bacteria then travel down an infection thread made by the plant into the developing nodule.
Wow, that's incredibly specific and coordinated. A whole chemical handshake leading to infiltration and building a home.
It really is, and it's highly specific, like a lock-and-key mechanism. Meaning that specific types of nod factors produced by a particular bacterial strain will only be recognized by certain legume species or varieties that have the matching receptors.
Yeah.
So, for example, the bacteria Rhizobia malolati makes nod factors that alfalfa recognizes, leading to nodulation. But those same nod factors won't work on peas. Peas need signals from a different bacterium, Rhizobium leguminosarum.
So it ensures the plant gets the right partner for the job, prevents party crashers.
Exactly. Ensures efficiency and compatibility.
And here's something truly amazing I read, connecting these different partnerships. Some of the plant genes involved in recognizing those bacterial nod factors are also involved in recognizing signals from the much older mycorrhizal fungi.
Yes. That's a relatively recent and absolutely stunning discovery. It suggests that legumes, when they evolved the ability to partner with nitrogen-fixing bacteria, didn't invent the whole signaling system from scratch. They likely co-opted and modified parts of the pre-existing genetic machinery that plants already used for the ancient mycorrhizal symbiosis.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's like evolution tinkering, reusing old tools for new tricks. A perfect example of descent with modification.
Precisely. It's a beautiful illustration of how evolution builds upon existing structures and pathways, nature's ingenuity and efficiency on display.
Well, we have certainly taken quite a journey through the hidden world of plant roots today. From those basic jobs of anchorage and absorption, to being food sources, hormone factories, massive structural supports, they are just incredibly diverse.
Absolutely. And we've seen that intricate link between structure and function right down to the cellular level, that crucial selective absorption, the gatekeepers ensuring the plant gets what it needs and keeps out what it doesn't. And of course, those vital partnerships with microbes, the hidden helpers that make life possible in so many environments.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. So what does all this mean for you listening in? Well, maybe next time you see a plant, could be a giant tree, could be a tiny weed poking through the pavement. Just take a second. Consider that immense, unseen world of activity buzzing away right below the surface, quietly shaping our planet, sustaining life in ways we rarely appreciate.
And perhaps also think about how understanding these often hidden processes, how that knowledge might inspire new ways for us to nurture our world, to foster healthier soils and ecosystems.